Hi guys, welcome to another video. So as mentioned in other social media posts, which you can follow on my Twitter or my Blue Sky, I actually recently purchased a 7400F, which is a 6-core 12-thread AM5 Ryzen 5 processor, and it is silently released. So it was actually just released based on AMD's official website on the 9th of January 2025. So it was just a silent launch at the beginning of this year. And this is in comparison to the 7500F, which is also a China-only exclusive CPU. And that was launched way back in July 2023. So that was more than a year ago. And also that is in direct comparison to the 7600X, which was one of AMD's first CPUs when AM5 was introduced, when I call this the Zen 4 architecture. Of course, we're now in Zen 5 in 2025, but back then the 7600X was launched in 2022, 27th of September. So about 3 years, 2 years plus, almost 3 years ago. Okay, so what's the difference between like the 7500F and the 7400F is actually very similar. If you look at AMD's website, you will see that from the 7600X, if you look at the boost clocks, they're all, by the way, all three of them are 6-core 12-thread processors. But from the 7600X down to the 7500F, the 7600X has a base clock of 4.7 gigahertz, whereby the 7500F only has a base clock of 3.7 gigahertz. So about 1 gigahertz less in terms of base clock. The boost clock of the 7600X goes up to 5.3, whereby the boost clock of the 7500F only goes up to 5 gigahertz. So that's a slight downgrade in a max boost clock. So yeah, there's that. But mostly the downgrade comes in the base clock, whereby the base clock is a lot lesser gigahertz. Then how about the 7400F? How does that differ? Is that when you compare it to the 7500F, everything is almost exactly the same. The base clock of 3.7 gigahertz is the same as the 7400F, but only that the max boost clock is only up to 4.7 instead of the 5 gigahertz of the 7500F. So basically, that's the main differences. But why does AMD come up with 7400F now? Is probably due to leftover silicon. So how, from what I understand from CPU manufacturers like Intel and AMD, is that generally they want they need the best silicon for their highest yield products, which is probably the 7950X on the AM4 platform. So when the cores are not, when the quality of the cores, like you have defective cores in the entire silicon wafer and they are not good enough, then you have to like downgrade them, cut away some of the cores, and then make them like I think the 7950X is the 16 core, right? So cut it down to the 12 core. So seal off some of the defective cores, make it a 12-core CPU. Then you will sell it as a 7900X, the 12-core 24-thread CPU. And if there are still further defective cores, you cut them away, and you can cut them in half and then you sell them. If it's a 12 core, you cut them in half, you become the 7600X. Or you could cut away some of the cores and then sell them as the 7800X. That was before the 7800X X3D was launched, because the X3D silicon is different from the regular Zen 4 silicon. So yeah, that is that. And then when you have 7600Xs, that is not, that means the quality of the silicon is not good enough for you to reach this base clock as well as the max boost clock. You have to downclock them. So you downclock them in the settings, or maybe in their hardware, in some of the hardware, and you sell them as 7500Fs. So I guess in this case, AMD still had leftover silicon that couldn't even match the max boost clock of the 7500F, but they could meet the base clock of 3.7 gigahertz, and then they decided to rebrand them and sell them as 7400Fs, and then only limiting their boost clock to 4.7 gigahertz. Of course, you could activate PBO and do some manual overclocking yourself. If you have if you luck out on a 7400F with decent silicon, you might be able to upclock it to the same speeds as 7500F. So right now, in today's comparison, I'm comparing the 7400F to the 7600X, mainly because it is what I have on hand. I have a 7600X which I bought from kind of like a Black Friday sale or Amazon Prime Day sale quite a while ago. I got it for cheap, which is why I own a 7600X. That is in my mid-range system. And recently I bought the 7400F, which was at a pretty good price. I think it's about 180 plus SGD. Later, if you look at my spreadsheets, I will have the price listed there. 187 SGD, whereby the listed price of a 7600X is at 330 SGD. Anyway, so looking at doing some research before I did this deep dive, there were already a few content creators who have uploaded benchmarks of 7400F. So I'll quote their so-called their work or their videos as my base research. So first is I saw Toasty Bros, which is a YouTube channel primarily focusing on budget builds. They are based in the USA, and they did a comparison between 7400F and the 7500F, and I've compiled some of their results. And also another channel, a smaller channel known as Neo Channel, actually did a very good comparison of the 7400F versus 7500F versus 7600X. So all the 6 core 12 thread CPUs in a showdown of 16 games in 1080p, which was really good. So I'm gonna compile their results as well. So yeah, basically my only gripe with these two videos is that they don't show a average of like what's the gain between what's the performance loss between a 7600X compared to a 7500F, and then what is the average performance loss from the 7500F to the 7400F, and then what is the price, how much are you paying less in terms of percentage when you decide between trying to buy a 7600X or a 7400F. So which is what I prefer. I prefer to have these numbers sorted out. And that is that. So I did a variety of tests. So these are my results. So I'll probably show the results here. Yep. So this is my spreadsheet here. Let me max it out. Okay. So I've done this study 7600X versus 7400F in just a short test of 5 games, because my SSD is only a 1TB SSD on my mid-range test system, and it just ran out of space. I couldn't install more games, and which is a problem with today's games. I need a bigger SSD, and I just didn't have the time to do a lot of extensive testing. For context, I'm testing in 1080p low settings to try and get the 1080p is still a resolution that most people play in, especially people with budget builds and with cheaper monitors. And also at the same time, I want to go to 1080p low because I want to minimize the load on the GPU so that the GPU doesn't end up being the bottleneck. And the GPU will probably be the bottleneck in 1440p. And for context, my GPU used here is the 6800. So it's the AMD 6800, 16 gigabyte GPU. Okay, so let me put that in my studies here. So yeah, so it's not the top end GPU, because I do have actually better GPUs. I have a 3090 in the background. I do have a 7900 XTX, but that is in my main system, which is hardline water cooled. If you see my other videos, maybe I'll link them. You can see I just for me to deep clean and to change the water and deep clean that particular hardline build, it took me a total of 4 days, right? And yeah, and I covered it in 2 videos. So generally, it's very hard to switch CPUs between a hardline water cooled system. So I do this all CPU switching and GPU switching on my other test benches on my other systems. So I actually do have a Lianli Dan A3 case, which is an M-ATX case that I built this AM5 system in. And I just simply swap the CPUs, the 7600X out and the 7400F, pop them in, make sure I do a BIOS update, get the latest BIOS beforehand, and then it ran without issues. Okay, so coming in my comparison, you can see that this is in 1080p low. From Marvel Rivals, we have a comparison of 183 FPS on the 7600X, and on the 7400F, we have 18% drop to 150 average FPS. In Helldivers 2, we have 188 average FPS on the 7600X, and when we switched to the 7400F, there was a 6.3%, I would call it probably a round down to 6% drop on to 176 FPS on the 7400F. In Cyberpunk 2077, the most popular game ever benchmarked, well, the 7600X was running on average of 172 FPS. Again, this is in 1080p low settings, and I try to make sure the FSR is disabled, because FSR is enabled by default. When you switch to low, you have to manually disable it, and it's annoying, but yeah, it happens. 7600X posted 172 average FPS. When I switch to the 7400F, it's only a measly 5% drop in performance to 163 FPS. Palworld, one of my favorite open world games, with cute animals and decent gunplay and a lot of nice base building mechanics. On the 7600X, it's 111. This is again on 1080p low settings, and by switching to 7400F, it's only another measly 5% drop off to 105 average FPS. So perfectly acceptable performance drop. In Baldur's Gate 3, which is one of the best RPGs of all time, I actually don't have a lot of time to play RPGs, but this is a game that I bought just for benchmarking because it is pretty popular still on Steam. On 1080p low settings is running at 214 FPS on the 7600X, whereby if you drop in the 7400F, it's only a measly 4% drop to 205 FPS. Well, I have CS2 on my chart here, but the problem is that when I was on my 7600X CPU, I didn't know how to benchmark CS2, because CS2 for benchmarking, I think I just realized you have to run a specific custom workshop map that benchmarks your system on CS2 and Source Engine. And I did that on the 7400F, which gave me an average FPS of 455. But since I didn't do that on the 7600X, I cannot do a comparison, right? But other benchmarkers have actually benchmarked it. I believe Toasty Bros have benchmarked it. Okay, so all in all, across my 5 games, I see an average performance drop of 7.85%, which we round it out. Let's say we round down and round up, it's about around 7 to 8% performance drop when we downgrade from the 7600X to the 7400F. Now, the issue is the price. The 7600X is, even though it's widely popular in hardware, like SimLim Square and all in Singapore, it's widely available on Lazada, widely available in SimLim Square, it is a little bit pricey. The cheapest I could find is about $330 from Amazon in SGD, whereby the 7400F is only an AliExpress exclusive, only sold in China. But for us Singaporeans, it is pretty easy to ship it in. The shipping cost is not too expensive, probably usually a few SGD. So it only cost me about 187 SGD with our GST tax factored in and with shipping costs. So if you compare $330 with $187, it is a massive 43% drop in price. So we save 43% in purchasing price for a measly 7% performance drop, which to me, I believe as a budget gamer, it will be very, very worth it, because basically we are saving about 150 SGD. For 150 SGD, right, you could get yourself a 2TB NVMe SSD, which is, you can buy it from AliExpress as well. I actually didn't review this particular one, but I bought about a 2TB AliExpress like Gen 4 NVMe SSD for about 140 SGD total in. So about 150 SGD, you could get yourself a full upgrade to a 2TB NVMe Gen 4 NVMe SSD, which is really fast for games. You could get yourself a 32GB stick of RAM for 6000 CL30, the highest performance RAM that is available for Ryzen systems, for Zen 4 75 systems. What else can you buy for 150 SGD? You could buy a budget GPU. Probably not enough. If you're going for something like a B580, you need about 400 SGD. So 150 SGD, yeah, it can contribute towards the GPU purchase. You could buy AIO, right? You could buy a motherboard, right? Budget motherboards actually cost more than 150 SGD, but if you top it up a little bit, you could like buy buy a brand new motherboard, an AM5 motherboard with that, like a B650M motherboard. So basically 150 SGD is a lot of money. It's like 43% drop in price. And yeah, so to me it's well worth it. My conclusion based on, just on my own testing is that yes, it is worth it to go for the 7400F. You could argue that the 7500F might be better, because I think on AliExpress, I'm not too sure, it will cost probably about 220 SGD or 210 SGD, around there. So it's about a $30 to $40 increase in price. But how does the 7500F compare to 7400F? So I will reference the Toasty Bros video. And for the Toasty Bros video, it was a nice video, nice and entertaining. But my gripe is that they didn't really do testing at 1080p, so you can't see a situation whereby they are CPU bound, right? Where the GPU is underutilized, and then they are purely testing the difference between the two CPUs. But what they are doing is a more realistic take on that. Most of the people who own a mid-range system, such as people who are buying a Zen 5 system, 7500F, 7400F, you will probably be gaming in 1440p, because 1440p monitors have come really cheap, and most of the time GPUs, even the Intel B580, which is considered a budget brand new GPU, is a pretty good gaming GPU at 1440p. So for 1440p, Toasty Bros have discovered that there's barely any difference. So for Black Myth Wukong, they tested it 7500F and 7400F, both are averaging around 60 FPS. Monster Hunter Wilds, the upcoming, probably the upcoming most popular game from Capcom and the most expensive that I've ever seen, is 100 SGD, by the way. It's 72 FPS across both CPUs. So you can see that they are GPU bound. So by the way, Toasty Bros are testing it at 1440p high, and they're testing it on a 7800 XT GPU, which is slightly better than my 6800 GPU. Mine is the non-XT. It's about a few percentage points better. So, but still, yeah, so at 1440p high settings, there's no difference between these two GPUs. At Cyberpunk 2077, they say that 7500F and 7400F are both getting 109 average FPS. In CS2, it's the first game that shows the difference. They see on the 7500F, they are getting 509 FPS, whereby on the 7400F, they are getting 453 average FPS. So it's a 11% drop in CS2 at 1440p high. And in Rainbow Six Siege, another very high FPS, high performance FPS game, because it's pretty old engine. There's 7500F, they're seeing 545, and on 7400F, they're seeing 540 average FPS. So a mere 0.9% drop. So if I average out these 5 results, it's mainly because of the CS2, the difference in CS2. The rest of the games actually zero, right? Negligible difference. So it's about an average 2% performance drop across 5 games, just because of CS2. But if you take CS2 out of the equation, at 1440p, there's no difference between 7500F and 7400F based on the testing by Toasty Bros. So I would say probably will be something very similar for both my testing 7600X and the 7400F will be that if you game at 1440p, you would probably not see much of a difference as well, because even at 1080p lower settings, where I try my best to underutilize the CPU and make it underutilize the GPU and make it a CPU bound test, I'm only seeing 7.8% average performance drop. And it's not realistic to for a mid-range gamer like most of you guys. If you own a mid-range system, or if you're considering on buying one of the 7400F and AM5 system, you'll probably be gaming usually at 1440p, or at least at 1080p, but at higher settings, like medium to high settings, based on what GPU you get. So at probably better settings, you will probably see a less performance drop. And looking at the research from Neo Channel, he did a 7400F, 7500F, and 7600X showdown. I think his study is more relevant. So he owns a 3080 Ti 12GB GPU. So to minimize so 12GB is probably enough for the games that he's testing. He's probably not VRAM limited. He's also testing at 1080p. What he didn't state was the setting. So I don't know whether he's testing at 1080p high or 1080p low. But based on the videos I see in his YouTube video, like the videos from the clips of the benchmark when they are running the games, clips of the games when they're running the benchmark. I'm guessing that he's probably running the games at 1080p medium to high settings, because they don't look like really low settings. Because in low settings, sometimes it's really quite obvious. You can see a lot of missing textures. So anyway, I'll just probably show the screenshots of my studies here. Basically on Forza Horizon, let's say 7600X to 7400F is about 4% drop. Assassin's Creed Origins has a 10% drop. This is 7600X going to the 7400F. Then things that have a higher performance drop will be in Total War 3 Kingdoms, which is a simulation game. So for people who never play Total War, basically it's a real-time simulation game, right? So and that actually requires more CPU cores and requires more CPU performance. So there was a more noticeable performance drop of 14% for Total War 3 Kingdoms. Other than that, notable performance drops was in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, 12.5%. In Witcher 3, there was a performance drop of 11% from 7600X to 7400F. Other notable drops were like Battlefield 5, Baldur's Gate 3, surprising also has a notable performance drop, even though it's in reality it's about only a 15 FPS drop, which means it's actually not that noticeable. And Hogwarts Legacy as well as Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl has a 10% performance drop. Other games like CS2, Red Dead Redemption 2, even Starfield actually doesn't have that much of a performance drop. Assassin's Creed's Odyssey, Watch Dogs Legions, less than 10%. Far Cry 6 was about 8%. Cyberpunk 2077 and Forza Horizon 5 only had a drop of around 4%. But if you are comparing the 7500F versus the typo here, 7500F versus the 7400F, what their studies based on the results I got from his YouTube video is that performance drop is quite minimal. The only significant big performance drop was again in Total War 3 Kingdoms, where between these two, China only CPUs, Total War 3 Kingdoms had a 10% performance drop. Then the rest was less than 10% for sure, some around 7. Like the 7% performance drop here is Battlefield 5, and the 6% performance drop in Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl. Then I created an average. So this is what I like. I like to average out the results so that it's a simple number that you can use to just a quick and easy number. So what is the average performance drop I'm getting? From a 7600X to a 7400F, based on Neo Channel's video, is only an average of 8%, which actually 8.6%, which actually corresponds well to my own studies, my own benchmarking, because in my own benchmarking of a limited study of 5 games, I'm seeing 7.85, which is around a 7 to 8% performance drop in 1080p, and he is, for his 16 games tested, he's seeing 8.6%. So pretty similar there. So I would say that 7 to 8% is probably a good number if you are looking at 1080p between 7600X and 7400F. If you are comparing between the 7500F to the 7400F, based on Neo Channel's study, because I do not own a 7500F right now, it is only a small performance drop of 4.4%. So about 4 to 5% in general. This is only at 1080p. So like I mentioned, if you're gaming at 1440p, the performance will probably be negligible across both of these. The only difference I see obviously is at a lower boost clock, your productivity performance will drop a bit. So I did run some tests in Cinebench. Okay, so anyway, I do not have Cinebench results. Unfortunately, I still have it in my other computer. I didn't bring it over, so I couldn't produce it. Okay, what's next with the 7400F is, from what I have heard from multiple content creators, is that people, I think there was an article online, I forgot, is it Video Cards or is it Tom's Hardware, which they deleted the 7400F and found that it is actually thermal paste instead of the normal solder. the indium solder that is used for most of the CPUs. So the thermal performance is a little bit lacking. In my experience while gaming the 7400F, I don't see thermal throttling. Most of the time it reaches about 60 plus, maximum maybe 80 plus at certain peak performance loads. In terms of degrees Celsius, which is still performing okay. So by the way, my cooler is a Peerless Assassin, Thermalright Peerless Assassin air cooler in the M80X case from the Lianli A3 case. Lianli Dan A3 case. So I would say, yeah, if you're gaming, it's not a big issue. When I did run Cinebench on it, I did see the thermal, it hit the thermal limit of 95 degrees, but that is the same for 7600X as well. 7600X will push itself to 95 degrees Celsius when under full load. Yeah, so not a big issue. So I guess the next step for me is to maybe try overclocking the 7400F, and also if I were to delete the 7400F and replace it with liquid metal, whether it can outperform or it can match the 7600X in maybe other scenarios like gaming and stuff. Maybe I could overclock it. So that will be, yep, another content piece to try and do. That is if I have the time to do it. So if you like more benchmarking contents or more comparisons like this, please subscribe to my channel here at Vamos Gaming. So at Vamos Gaming, what I really enjoy is getting value products. So like I want value for money in my gaming systems, in my GPUs, in my CPUs, and so on. So I really enjoy products that give good value. It could be at a high-end good value. That's why I own a 7900 XTX, because to me that was good value. And on the low end good values will be probably like a B580 GPUs, which is probably why I do a lot of videos on the what's the best value. Okay, so if you like good value in gaming system, in PC gaming, please subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys on the next one.